The wind felt cold on my skin as I rushed through the tree line, my face and bare limbs cut and bruised by passing branches. As I slowed down to catch my breath, my lungs are frozen by the frigid air. I had been running for what felt like hours at this point, and my legs felt they could snap at any moment. Eventually, I slow to a stop and stand still to listen. When I hear nothing but the forest ambience, I feel my legs give way as I fall to my knees, utterly exhausted. I wasn't sure if I'd lost them, but at this moment, I finally felt safe. Lost in the woods, but safe. I sat there for a while, just feeling the cool winter breeze on my skin and the occasional dewdrop on my bare back. After a long while, I decided I should keep moving again. The more ground between me and that place, the better. I stand to my feet, dirt still clinging to my bloodied legs as I begin to sprint again. Every muscle in my legs aching from the running, accompanied by the pain from the dozens of deep cuts I'd been gifted by razor wire. And before long I found myself slowing again out of exhaustion. When I came to a stop, I heard the faint sound of breathing behind me. Whoa, dude, you good? I spin around to find a girl staring at me, her eyes widening with concern the more she looked at me. She was the same age and height as me, wearing a baggy black jumper with some kind of symbol on the front. Her shoulder-length black hair covered one of her minty teal eyes as she stood in a pair of heavy black boots, a black bag haphazardly over her shoulder. You good? She repeats after a moment's silence. I didn't know how to answer properly, and I didn't really want to either. After a moment, I slowly nodded a yes, and with the hope that she would believe it and leave me be. You really don't look good, man, she says as she looks me up and down, her eyes holding a mix of confusion and growing worry. I take a few cautious steps back. What the hell did this to you? She asks nervously, her face growing pale. I slowly look down to myself, my white shorts stained with both dry and fresh blood alike. My legs covered in so many lacerations they were almost drenched in blood. My pale torso pockmarked with bruises and cuts. I look up, unsure how to answer her. Can you talk? She inquires, noting my silence. And I slowly shake my head. Oh, I didn't realize. She mumbles with some masked embarrassment as the ambience of the forest hums softly over our heads, the winter wind brushing through the trees. Do you need help? She asks. Before I could answer, I heard the sound of something break off in the distance, and as I turned to look, I felt movement next to me. I turned my head back to find the girl standing right in front of me, reaching into her bag, causing me to jump back out of reflex. Whoa, man, it's all right, she reassures. I'm just getting something. After a moment, she pulls a small white bundle from the bag and unwraps it into a long ribbon before reaching out to hand it to me. I slowly grab the bandage, staring at it for a moment before looking back up to her. You know how to tie a bandage, right? I look down at it and then back up to her. Cautiously, I shake my head. She looks at me, confused, and after a brief second, she grabs the bandage and kneels down to coil it around one of my legs, covering as many openings as she could. I don't really have any more, but this should help a bit, she says while tying it into a knot. When she finishes, she stands to her feet, swinging the bag loosely back over her shoulder. Well, I guess we should get you someplace safe, she suggests. You good to follow me? I look up at her for a moment before I look back the way I came, realizing I never really had a plan for what would happen once I got out. So, as I turn back to the girl, her glowing eyes waiting for an answer, I slowly nod an unsure yes. Hours pass as we stroll through the trees as the first specks of snow fall from the evening sky, the shadows growing longer until the red haze of the sunset grows in the distance. The girl stops briefly to search her bag, retrieving a small flashlight before turning it on to illuminate the darkening forest, a light fog setting in as we continue to walk. The fog grew steadily as we pass under the forest canopy. As we walk, I begin to hear a faint noise growing steadily in the distance behind us. I slowed to try and hear it better, and as it got closer, I think I could make it out as talking, or is it static? By now I had stopped walking entirely and was just listening to the noise. A shallow pang of worry growing in the back of my mind. The girl noticed I'd stopped, turning to me with a puzzled look. It wasn't long before she realised I was listening to something, and by now she could hear it too. "Is that a radio?" she mumbles to herself. As the noise got closer, I start to step away from it, which she seemed to notice. Should we go?" she whispers. I look to her and nod. We move back from the noise and slowly turn away to continue walking. Eventually the noise went quiet as it went another direction, and soon we found ourselves absorbed in the forest ambience again. After an hour or so, the girl's torch flickered in the fog, and after a few minutes later, it cut out completely. "Damn it!" I hear the girl curse to herself in a hushed tone. "I swear I changed the battery this morning." I look over to her, hastily searching her bag. "And I left the spares at home," she frustrates. "Well, looks like we're walking lightless then." I look at the torch for a moment, and as she moves to stuff it back into her bag, I reach out my hand to her. It takes her a moment to realise, but when she does, she looks back at the torch. "I guess you can have it if you want." She pulls the torch away from the bag, and her arm moves to hand it to me, but before she can, it floats effortlessly from her hand to mine. "What?" she stammers. Did you just..." I look up at her with confusion. "How the hell?" She looks at her hand and then mine. I fiddle with the torch for a few moments until I finally find what looks like the battery. I place my hand on it, and after a minute the light flickers back on. The girl just stands there, staring at it. "But the battery was just..." She trails off. I hand the light back to her, and as she holds it in her hand, she stands still, looking between it and me with a mix of wonder and confusion swirling in her teal eyes. Thanks, I guess," she stutters. I wasn't sure why she was so confused. It was as if she'd never seen someone do that before. We should go," she says, breaking the silence, and began to walk again. But as I follow, a sharp pain erupts in the back of my neck and I fall to the ground like a mannequin. The last thing I remember seeing was the girl running towards me as I lay there unmoving on the forest floor. The blinding white lights of the operation table seared my already pained eyes as I screamed, the lackluster anesthetics failing to block the vivisection from my mind. My brain boiled at every pang of pain from the incisions, the doctors barely flinching at my cries of strained agony and desperate wordless pleas. I try to break free, to escape, but the restraints hold me still, my head pounding with every movement and every struggle. The operators looked on with indifference as they calmly performed their tasks. My overwhelmed mind barely noticing them lift my still-beating heart and placing it with their bloody arrangement of other samples. This went on for what felt like centuries until they finally sealed the cavities back together and took me from the operating room. My eyes still singed from the veritable floodlights above that table, barely able to see anything beyond moving blurs of colour. The metal latches locked shut as I lay motionless and broken in the empty room. The vivid memories of the operations ravaged my mind like a disease as I lay there terrified to move. Cold tears rolled down my frozen face as I desperately try to think of anything else on earth to no avail until eventually I fall into an unwilling sleep. Days pass as my head fades in and out of consciousness, swimming between dozens of interweaving lucid nightmares until I bolt upright in a cold sweat. After a few moments of panicked breathing, I managed to slow down my thoughts enough to calm down. This was the third test this week. I'm not sure how many I could take, but I didn't want to see that pale room again. I've seen it so many times, and sometimes I wish I knew how to die so I could escape it. But nothing I've tried has ever worked. I sat there in silent thought for hours, until the door opens and several armed guards barge into the room, one of them quickly injecting a sedative, and I fall again into blackness.